welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts. And first thing I want to do is I want to thank everybody that went out and voted in the school board election last Tuesday. I want to thank the people that voted for me. I willing to put their trust into me for a little bit longer. And I think it's important, and I'm really glad that we had 8 people running, and that's what we need on all elections. We need to have at least 2 candidates for every single office, whether you agree with them or not. The fact that everyone was out there was 8 people running, I think that's good for democracy. That gives everybody the opportunity to say their piece and for everyone to vote who they want to vote for. The only unfortunate thing about the school board election and the budget, yes, there wasn't really much on it, but less than 10% of the people, registered voters, voted. And that's always kind of sad when so few vote, because basically it leaves it up to small groups that can really control what's going to happen for the next 1, 2, 3, or 4 years. That happens at city elections, it happens at state elections, it happens at school board elections. You know, it'd be nice if we had 30–40%, at least 30 to 40% of the people out there who would give us a really good pulse, a really good idea of what the city wants and what direction it would like to go to, because I think we had about 105, 110 people at the deliberative session putting input. And where you have people come and say, yes, I can afford $100 more, I can afford $50 more. Well, yes, they can, but the people at them there, they were only one of 9,000 taxpayers, homeowners in Keene. So that has an effect on excuse me, everybody. So if someone goes and says this position is worth $70,000 and it's only going to cost me $100, well, yes, it's only going to cost you or I $100, but it also means that we need 700 other people willing to pay $100 to come up with the $70,000 for that position or that program. And so again, thank you for voting, and thank you for coming out in the rain to vote. And I appreciate those 9 extra people that voted for me. And so basically won by 8 votes. But you know what? That's a competitive race. It's a squeaker, but it's enjoyable to have that because you had to work for it. And so one of the things that'll be coming up on the school board is, what are we going to do? Are we going to come up with $382,000 to pay the architect and the project manager to come up with some hard numbers so we can bring to the public next year to put on a warrant article? And that may be what may happen. So if you go with $382,000 for the architect, we put $250,000 from the building sale of 34 West Street into the a reserve fund. Then we put another $100,000 into a reserve fund. So and then we put $20,000 in from surplus from the money that we've already taken from we received from advertisement alumni field. And so basically that's $750,000. And they're going into funds and other costs. But the way New Hampshire does its, how do we explain to the public, is that $250,000 doesn't get counted one way or another unless the voters approve it. The $100,000 again, unless the voters approve it. So now if the school board goes and approves that $750,000, well, that $750,000 is part of the $2 million that we as a school board told the taxpayers that they were getting back to offset taxes. Well, plain and simple, that means come when you get your December bill to be paid December 1st, you're going to get a little surprise, because that $750,000 that we'll be spending will be spending prior to July 1st will have to be made up with additional tax revenue. So, and I don't know the number right offhand, and so hopefully I can get John Hopper to give us the number, or the finance chair to give us the number, because that's going to be a substantial increase, and I think it's important that the people of Keene, the taxpayers of Keene, know what that number is now and don't get a surprise right before Christmas. And so the other part on the school board is coming up is we want to rush. Some people saying, hey, we have to give something to the public for next March. Something has to be on the ballot. Well, one of those things is when we came in and we voted on Jonathan Daniels, closing Jonathan Daniels, we voted on the 4 schools. That was all based on information that was available at that time, those prices at that time. When Kristen Blaze did the great job, she worked her butt off getting those numbers. Her recommendations and the committee's recommendation was based on the numbers that the architect gave us, based on the numbers that we could save, even paying the bond off and reducing administrative overhead, how that was going to be saved. Well, right now, because even if it goes to 10 to 12 million, that's an extra $5 million over what was projected. Well, that $5 million changes the whole number system. There is, you can say, we can put $12 million, and right now, as I'm running through it, I don't see how there is any cost savings whatsoever using the old criteria based on the $7 million. So what we can be easily looking at is, yeah, we may upgrade the school, we may remodify it, we may make Jonathan Daniels a preschool, but it is highly likely right now, by doing those modifications, the cost to run our schools, the cost per educating a child in the elementary is going to go up, not down. I can't see any cost savings by spending $10 to $12 million right now. So we're going to have to do something, but we don't have to run through and do something right now because we have to do something. This is one we need to take our time. We need to look at it. We need to go and say, what is the educational benefits? What is the cost benefits? If it's not going to save us money, what are we going to get out of changing the standard operation procedure that we have right now? And so there's a whole bunch of things, and I don't like to say we have to go right back to the drawing board, but we can't go in and just change a few things because the number changed. When the number went from 7 million to up to as high as 16 million, everything changes. All the criteria, all the decision factors, they have all changed. And so we as a school board, we have to sit down, we have to look at it, we have to take the personalities out of it, we have to take our loyalty to the school out of it. We're going to have to go and say what is going to be best for the students and people of Keene. Are we going to look for a 5 to 10 year fix, or are we going to look for a 20, 30, 40 year fix? There are so many options that are possibly open right now. And there's a whole bunch of things. And, the strange part is some of the people that are adamantly against making changes right now will have no problem making changes maybe 2 to 3 years from now if their child is no longer in that elementary school. But it can't be about us adults. It can't be about us on the school board. It can't be about us, sending our kids. It has to be about the children, and we have to make sure that we do a good job for the children, because if we don't do it right, the cost that we'll be paying to upgrade these buildings will result in loss of services and loss of educational opportunity for the Keene students. Because if we have to pay $1 million extra a year to cover the bonding cost of fixing these schools, and we're looking at the possibility that 2, maybe 3 of the schools will be totally obsolete before we paid a 20 or 30-year bond off, that has a big effect. Those have to be taken into consideration, and otherwise that means there'd be total neglect on our part. And so, again, that's one of the things that we're really, really going to have to take care of, because when you put the sequester, that's this year, and it's going to go for the next 9 years. Then you got the governor and people from both parties putting us in kind of an ethical no-win bind, saying is, support my gambling, education won't get the money it needs. So not one of those, again, false choices. So again, I see a lot of us adults are looking at what's best for us in the short term and really not paying much attention what is best for our children in the long run. So it's going to be interesting in the upcoming year. Excuse me. And remember, January is not that far away. 9 months from now, we'll be having that hearings in the first Saturday in January, trying to figure out what we're going to get ready to put on the warrant for the voters. And like I said, we haven't even signed a contract or funded the money to pay for the work to get the thing done. So you can look at it, 270 days is not a lot of time when you may be talking 10, 12, $13 million to spend in looking at the benefits of it. So what I'm going to do now is switch on over to some VA information. And we talk about the VA all the time, but we always basically talk about the VA as a boys' league, a boys' club. But as we've seen in the Iraq War and Afghanistan, there's an awful lot of women that go into combat now, quote unquote. May not be official combat, but if you're getting shot at and you get killed, that's combat. And again, in the front lines, what is a front line in today's war, Afghanistan or Iraq, which is now over? If someone shows up in an American uniform, an Afghan uniform, and goes in and sets off a suicide bomb in the chow hall, quote unquote, you may not consider that front line, but that's front line, and that's a combat. And so what the VA has been doing is it's been working really hard to get outreach to women veterans, and basically women's veterans health care. You served, you deserve. The change in face of the U.S. military. As the front lines of battles and the rule of warfare have changed dramatically in the last 50 years, so has the face of the United States military. Women constitute 14% of today's active duty soldiers, serving along men as fighter pilots, gunners, warship commanders, military police, and locations around the world. Today's women soldiers are tomorrow's women's veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs currently treats record number of women while preparing for the next influx of the coming year. Women make up 11% of the veterans from Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. That equates to nearly 70,000 women. The VA expects the number of women veterans to seek care at a VA facility to double in the next 5 years. And while the emphasis is being placed on a lot of the women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, what I think a lot is overlooked is Vietnam. Okay, yes, you got Korea, but look at Vietnam, the number of women that served in Vietnam. So if you go Vietnam, quote, official end 1975, so you go in and say 25, it's 37, 25, 38, 18, 56, 57. So some of the youngest women that that served in Vietnam are 57, 58, 59, more in their 60s, and a bunch of them are possibly in their 70s. And so, but a lot of these Vietnam veteran women and the other ones that served in between, they've never got involved in the VA system. And they don't have that connection with the VA system. A lot of them don't even understand what the VA system can afford them. And it's healthy Asian women veterans health care. You served, you deserve the best care anywhere. VA provides women veterans with a full range of services necessary for healthy aging, from disease screening and preventive to home health care and support with end-of-life decisions. Services are available either in-house in some VA facilities or through referrals to appropriate clinicians in the community. Every VA facility is committed to meeting the unique needs of women veterans by dedicating the highest quality care to each woman while affording her the privacy, dignity, and sensitivity to genuine specific needs that she deserves. The White River Junction has just spent a great deal of money, and they've opened up a women's health care section at White River Junction. And I've talked to a number of women veterans. They have no idea that it's even up there. A lot of women have no idea they even qualify, because up until 1996, Bill Clinton. Up until 1996, really, the VA was restricted to combat veterans or veterans with combat service support, combat service-connected injuries or illnesses, so which that basically wiped out, disqualified a lot of people, because really up to 1996, only about 3.1 million of the veterans even qualified for VA health services. But the law that changed in 1996 opened up the VA to quite a few people, actually tens of millions of veterans, and really the only criteria right now that is the income. And depending where you live, but most of the cases, quite a few veterans can get services in there. Some of them get them free, some of them get them at co-pay. Some of the programs that are offered for women veterans right now: nutrition and fitness information, safe driving evaluations, help with that bone prevention and disease, menopause management support, heart disease, which is the #1 killer of women in the United States. Breast cancer, and pink gets a lot of press and everybody sees it, but the #1 killer of women, heart disease and things like strokes as a result of high blood pressure and heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, colon, breast, and gynecological cancer. They also provide long-term end-of-life services, home health services, community living centers, geriatric care, advance directive, living wills, and burial services. And so basically right now the general guidelines of eligibility is 2 years of active duty service, deployment in Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, or Operational New Dawn, or anyone who's been the victim of military sexual trauma. And so if any woman is interested, or if you're interested for a parent or a sibling, you can call 1-800-827-1000. Or you can go for benefit. Other one is 1-877-222-8387. So 1-877-222-8387. So this benefit will VA Health Benefit Call Center. This can give you a lot of information to find out if your mother or your grandmother, your sister, your aunt, or some of the other women in your life are eligible for VA care. And especially now when you get a lot of people, especially women working part-time or 2 part-time jobs with no benefits, and they have no health care protection and stuff. And as we're also going and looking at it, there are more and more women who have PTSD and some other problems that they've just kept them to themselves. And so just give a call and can see what happened. Also, you get a confidential Veterans Crisis Line, and online chats are available, and we are here to help you. Veterans Crisis Line, it's your call. You earned it. Again, for women who served in the military. And veterans are getting treatment every day. We recognize our symptoms, and we're getting treatment, and we're getting better. Martha Davis, United States Coast Guard Reserve, Navy Reserve, 1973 to 1996. You can get the help you need to get your life back on track. You've earned it. United States Army, 2003 to 2007. VA is a good place to find resources for those who need it. United States Navy, 1969, 1971. Again, the Veterans Crisis Hotline for women, it's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to provide confidential support by phone or online chat. Okay, if you have any questions, call the Veterans Crisis Line. The number is 1-800-273-8255, press 1. Again, 1-800-273-8255 and press 1. And some of the issues that they will talk about, callers in time of crisis. Hopelessness, feeling that there's no way out, anxiety, agitation, sleeplessness, or mood swings, feeling like there's no reason to live, rage or anger, engaging in risky activities without thinking, increased alcohol or drug abuse, withdrawn from family and friends. The presence of the following signs require immediate attention. Thinking about hurting or killing yourself, looking for ways to kill yourself, talking about death, dying, or suicide, self-destructive behavior such as drug abuse, weapons, etc. If you are a veteran or you know a veteran who's experienced any of these assaults, call the Veterans Crisis Line immediately. You are not alone. We are standing by to help. It's your call. Again, 1-800-273-8255 and press 1. Again, there's a lot more stuff out there for women's veterans, especially women veterans in crisis. I guess it's not nice to say. Maturing women veterans, and even young veterans who are just returning back from Afghanistan or recently came back from Iraq. There are services out there, and they can help you. And for the younger veterans, female veterans, here's some of the services: primary care, gynecological care, maternity care, newborn care, birth control, infertility evaluation, menopause evaluation, cancer screening, mammograms, nutrition, weight management, stop smoking. Excuse me. They got mental health, management of depression, anxiety, and stress, adjustment from deployment, counseling, treatment for military sexual trauma, parenting and caregiving issues, violence and abuse, alcohol and drug dependence. And they also have programs like vocational rehabilitation, educational opportunities, links to job and career counseling, and service for homeless vets. And MOVE, manage obesity in veterans everywhere. So again, like this one I said before, 1-877-222-8387. Again, if you can't remember the numbers, all you can do is you can go online to DAV.gov, Department of Veterans Affairs.gov. You can go to the Veterans Clinic right there on Route 101, which is really called Marlborough Street. Or you can just ask another veteran. There's a number of places that Just ask the questions and you can be pointed into the right direction. You know, we've been telling men for years and years that they don't have to be there alone. They got people there to take care of them, to help them, someone that got their back. You know what? It's time now for us to get, for the women vets and other vets to cover your back, to help you out. And so, again, if you have any questions, give a call. If you have any questions, ask. Don't do it alone, because if you're doing it alone, you're not going to get better. The quicker you realize it and ask for help, the quicker you can be on your way to recovery or on a better excuse me, quality of life issues. Getting dry in here. I'm going to move over to another issue that's been getting a lot of attention, and as I talk to people, most of them have really no idea what it is or what it means, or they have a bunch of misconceptions. It's called the CPI, the Consumer Pricing Index. Why is the CPI important? For the majority of Americans, the CPI plays a major impact on their financial health, standard of living, and quality of life. 50 million plus Social Security beneficiaries depend on the CPI. Military retirees, federal civil service retirees, postal retirees, food stamp recipients, even school lunch program participants, and numerous collective bargaining agreements are all based on the CPI. Contracts, when people go in and say, hey, I want to lease this building at the airport for the next 10 years, we may put in basically a standard CPI Boston region escalator every year, quote unquote, so that would automatically increase the rent or the lease payment every single year. And so, but what is the CPI? The CPI is called the Consumer Price Index. It's a measure of the average change over time in the price of a group of products that people buy. Products and services. Basically, the urban consumer, which is about 87% of the people in the United States. You know, people living in Keene, Manchester, Boston. You know, if you're living on a farm someplace, you don't count. You're living in jail, or you're homeless, or some of these other places that don't count. But basically, it's urban, basically city costs. For a market basket of about 200 consumer goods and services. And so basically they've come up and they've decided, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that these groups, this is a group that the average 87% of the American people buy. And so what we want to do is, what is the cost from year to year? And so, quote unquote, that's how you come up with it's a CPI, Computer Price Index. And sometimes people say the Computer Price Index is inflation. And it can reflect inflation somewhat, but the Computer Price Index is not inflation. And also, the Computer Price Index is not a cost of living measure. A cost of living index measures changes over time in the amount of the materials and consumer supplies that you need to maintain a certain level or a certain standard of living. And so what happens is when you got the CPI or the cost of living measurement or inflation index, while they overlap, but in a lot of cases they're not the same thing, and people interchange them quite often. And the current, and I went back and researched, the current CPI is based on information from the last consumer expenditure survey that was conducted in 2007 and 2008 by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what the Bureau of Labor Statistics did, they had 7,000 families across the country, basically out of those 87% of the rural places, and basically they looked at their spending habits. So for what they did is for a year, they said, what did you spend your money on for this quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter? Then it took another 7,000 families and gave them a 2-week journal and says, write down everything that you spent your money on for the 2 weeks. Okay, once they did that, then they took them together and they weighed them. They put weight values to them in 200 categories. And so, for example, if you go and say the people in the Boston area spends 42% of their money on housing, where the people in the California area may spend 32% of that on housing. The people in Florida may spend 28%. So what they've done is they've made arrangements and calculations for different areas. And the funny part is you can't compare area to area because the system is just not set up to it. You get numbers, but there's no scientific way to compare Boston to New York City, for example, because New York City can be up 1.8 and Boston can be up 1.6. But that's just a number, but that is not really comparison. And so basically in the 8 categories, they've got food and beverages. Okay, cereal, milk, coffee, chicken, wine, full service, you know, go out to Lucre or you go out to Longhorn, and snacks. The second is housing. It's the rent of a primary residence. And so basically you can go and say in Keene, excuse me again, a primary residence could be $900 a month for rent. And then basically owner's equivalent rent. Just because you may pay $5,000 mortgage on your house does not mean it's $5,000 in the system because it's owner equivalent rent. The other part is fuel, oil, bedroom furniture, apparel, shirts, sweaters, dresses, jewelry. 4, transportations, new vehicles, airline fares, gasoline, car insurance. Number 5, medical care, prescription drugs, medical supplies, doctor visits, eyeglasses, hospital costs. Number 6 is recreation, TV, toys, pets, sporting equipment, admissions to the Red Sox game. Other ones, education and communication, the cost of college tuition, postage, phone, computers, computer software. And the last one is other goods and services, tobacco, smoking product, haircut, personal services, funeral expenses. And so why are these really kind of important is because when you weigh them, okay, transportation costs, new vehicles, airline fares, gasoline, car insurance. Well, if you don't have a car, okay, it doesn't really matter. Price of gas is going up. If you're not flying, that doesn't affect you. You don't buy a new vehicle, that doesn't affect you. Education, if you're not sending your kids to school, postage, again, different people use them as different percentages. And the other part with the CPI does not involve anything that has to do with savings. So if you take 10% of your money, of your paycheck, and invest it into savings, bonds, stocks, or whatever, the CPI does not take that in consideration. So if the prices go up and you instead of putting that 10% into savings, you only put 2% into savings and 8% goes into paying for this stuff, that's not really going to reflect. So basically, when they put all this stuff together in all these categories, there's 80,000 items, quote unquote, that every month that the Bureau of Labor Statistics sends people out to go check. I think you've seen them sometimes in the big stores. They have these little calculators plugging into different prices, and part of that is to decide what's going on if the prices are going up. But here's the catch, the way it goes. If I go in and I like, let's see, Walpole's pistachio ice cream, and it's $5.99 a gallon. And Walpole's ice cream goes up to $6.99 a gallon. And so I decide, well, I'm going to get the store brand at $5.99 a gallon. Okay, so what will happen is the price increase in Walpole's ice cream would never show up in these numbers because I substituted. Because what it says is it doesn't cost me any extra money because I'm still getting ice cream and I'm still paying the same price. But what it means is I'm not getting good ice cream. I've lowered my standard of ice cream, but that does not show up in the CPI. If I've went and said, okay, other stuff is going up, so instead of buying the $5.99 ice cream, I go down to the $2.99 pistachio ice cream that may only have a few pistachios and smashed up and green dye in it. The computer price index would actually go down for me. And what's one right here? It's good. No COLA for the quarter. Through the first 3 months of fiscal year 2013, inflation is down 0.05%. So, for all you people out there, how many would you say that everything that you're buying right now is cheaper than it was last year? Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the way they do it, it's gone down 0.5% in over the last quarter of last year. So that's how it goes, and they call it substituting. And so, good apples, bad apples. Well, good apples and not so good apples, back and forth. And so, if you had steak and the price of steak went up, they said no big deal. You buy cheaper steak. And so, if you're buying cheaper steak, there is no inflation. And if it goes up high enough, you buy hamburger. So again, there is no inflation. Matter of fact, there is really disinflation, or as they call it. If I go in and buy, for example, an iPad, if I bought an iPad 1 at $649, and then I bought an iPad 3 at $649, according to the CPI and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is no inflation because I'm getting more for my money at $649 with an iPad 3 than I did at iPad 1. And so what happens is, so if we go in and say computer and education in computer and electronics is worth 5% of my budget, and so it goes in and says, hey, I went and got the iPad 3 for $649 compared to someone buying the iPad 1 at $649. So they can say, well, you know what? You really got $50 more worth of value now than you did. And so what it will do is go in and say, okay, he got $50 more, and then multiply the $50 by the 5%. And so that whatever that number came out to would then result in a decrease in the inflation for the year. Same thing is if where the federal government goes and says, New Hampshire, we have a problem and you have to use ethanol in the winter and it's going to cost 10 cents a gallon more. Well, that 10 cents a gallon more doesn't count as inflation because it's a mandatory cost, and we get a benefit of having cleaner air, and because we have cleaner air, we have less sick days and we go to doctors less. So again, that 10%, that 10 cents per gallon, which may cost you 20 bucks a month more, then gets valued as a deflationary factor, and it gets multiplied by whatever that percentage for our region is of one of those 8 categories. And so that's the way it's been going, and that's one of the reasons why except not last year, but 2 years, for 2 years, there was no Social Security cost of living increase, because the reason there was no cost of living increase was because they were able to, the Bureau of Labor Statistics was constantly able to substitute things by lower quality by saying is, yep, you are going to spend, you're going to buy lower quality stuff because other stuff are going up. So, but what happens with that under the CPI is, if I'm wealthy and it costs me $75 for a steak and it goes up to $80, I'm still going to have that steak. Well, if you're not too wealthy and you're working class and you're only making $15,000, $20,000 a year, and that steak went from $2 a pound to $3 a pound, and so you're not going to pay $3 a pound unless it's a special occasion and you go without something else. Chances are you're going down to, instead of 90% lean hamburger, you're going down to 70% lean hamburger. And so in that case, which makes it really, ethanol going up, you get a benefit because you drive cleaner air. And so the federal government takes that benefit and uses it to lower the CPI. But if you don't have enough money and you go from 90% lean to 70% lean, and you have more fat in your system, which clogs your arteries, which should have a negative effect, they don't use that to increase the CPI. That is just set off to the side. Okay. That's kind of a rough thing, the way they play with the CPI. But now there's a new CPI that's going. It's called the chain CPI. And the chain CPI has the potential to make the federal government a lot of money, cost a lot of people on Social Security, retire, people who get federal retirement, state retirement, even regular corporate retirements. It's going to could cost them a lot of money. It also can cost the American taxpayers a lot of money. The CPI, we mess with the CPI quite often. President Carter changed the CPI, President Reagan changed the CPI, and President Clinton changes the CPI. Most people don't pay attention to the CPI, but like I said, when you have 50 million people collecting Social Security, you have a couple of million collecting military retirement, a tenth of a point here or a tenth of a point there, people don't really pay attention to it. Then all of a sudden, it adds up to big money. Well, the new chain CPI, which basically when you compute, it goes in and it undergoes the current CPI by an average about 0.3. So, for example, last year's CPI was 1.7. The chain CPI would have been 1.4. And for someone making $1,250 a month for security, that would have been about $3.75 a month's difference. And you go, what's $3.75? What's 45 bucks a year? Well, in a few minutes, I'll show you what it could easily be done. The purpose of the chain CPI is where the regular CPI right now is saying, yep, I was buying 90% lean hamburger, and it got too expensive, so I went down to 70% lean hamburger, but I'm still got hamburger. So right now, with the chain CPI is, 90% lean is too high, 70% lean is too high. So I'm going to get this chicken, this low-quality chicken instead, and because it's cheaper. And that's how I'm going to get my protein. So I'm no longer eating the hamburger. I'm eating chicken. Basically, with the change CPI is I will keep substituting down, down, down until something I can afford, even if it has nothing to do with what I originally started with. Protein's protein. So if I go from top round steak down to cube steak, hey, again, that will then say the CPI is not increasing as fast as it should. Definitely substituting, but with the new chain CPI, it can substitute right out of what you're actually used to eating, or taking, or buying, or different things like that. The President Obama has already said he's willing to put the change CPI on the table. Nancy Pelosi said that she's open to a less generous formula for adjusting Social Security benefits to inflation, which might be preferable to other entitlement cuts the Republicans are offering, such as increasing the Medicare age requirements. And so when you go in and saying President Carter did it, President Reagan did it, President Clinton did it, President Obama is open to it, Congresswoman Pelosi is open to it, and why would the Republicans are open to it? Why would they be open to it? Okay. Before we get to that, I'll tell you, remember I talked about what is $3.75 going to do per month? If you're 65 years old and you start collecting Social Security, and you get the minimum about $14,800 a month, over 20 years, you'll lose $8,904. Basically if you go 1.7, what it was last year, and continue on and use the change, you would lose $8,904, or basically about $450 a year for the next 20 years. That's an average because, it would keep going higher and higher each year due to compounding. If you're 65 and you get about the average of $18,000, you'd lose almost $11,000, or about $550 a year for the next 20 years. Now you're 65 and you're a couple getting $32,000 a year. Basically, as a couple under the new chain, you'd lose pretty close to $20,000, or almost $1,000 a year as a result of the new formula under the chain's CPI. But the dangerous part about the chain is the longer you live, the greater it affects you. The delta cost gets higher and higher and higher every single year due to compounding. But here's another part about the chain CPI. The chain CPI also works for military retirees, but it also works for disabled veterans. So if you're a 25-year-old corporal in Afghanistan and you get seriously injured and you get 100% disability at 25, the calculators I had only went up for 40 years. Okay, by the time you're 65 years old, for someone that's 100% disabled, you would lose $83,000. You would receive $83,000 less, or over $2,000 a year. So that's a 40-year gap. And so when you go, if the individual is to live another to 85, he or she could very easily be $100,000 to $125,000 less over their costs, and basically equivalent to about $2,500, or basically a little bit more than $200 a month less. And if you're 100% combat service support, combat service-connected veteran, disabled veteran, and you get maybe $30,000 a year, you're not, and you have a wife and you have some kids, you're not going to be able to live on $30,000 a year and expect your children to go into college and stuff. And so, but that's one of the things that side benefits of, I don't call it a benefit, of the change CPI. Why does the president like change CPI? Why does Nancy Pelosi like change CPI? Why does President Obama like change CPI? Why does Senator Bernie Sanders hate change CPI? Because the Moment of Truth Project estimates switching to the change CPI for all inflatable index government programs and the tax code would reduce the deficit by $236 billion over the next 10 years. In 2010, the CBO said, the Congressional Budget Office said it would be about $221 billion. The change CPI would result in a larger tax increase proportionally for lower and middle-income Americans. The reason why? Because your standard deductions, your dependent deductions will all be based on the change CPI. So what would happen was your standard deduction and your dependent deduction would go up less and less each year. And as your income, it would put you into higher tax brackets. And so, because the other part is the chief would increase taxes by 120, according to Congressional Budget Office, it would increase, the change CPI would increase tax revenues by $124 billion over the next decade. The reason why? Because part of the fiscal cliff, they did away with the alternative minimum tax, you know, the one for all those millionaires that before weren't paying any taxes at all. But they kept changing it for inflation. Well, what happened was they did away with that. So everybody now that used to be with the alternative minimum tax would now pay the regular tax rate. And the regular tax rate would go up less as the with the change CPI. And so, but basically, the majority of the tax increase would be on people making between $30,000 to $40,000 per year. 75% of all the new revenue, or 75% of the $124 billion, let's say 90 billion of that $124 billion will be by people earning less than $200,000 a year. And so what would happen would be was the money that we just increased the tax rate on people making more than $400,000 and $450,000 a year. Basically, they would be able to recover mostly all that money back under the change CPI. And so that's why they're in such a good mood to support the change CPI. The change CPI is a backdoor way of cutting benefits, backdoor way of increasing taxes without having to vote. It's really a coward's way of voting tax increases and voting down benefit reductions because you don't have to go on record and say, I voted against this, I voted against this. You just quietly change the CPI index, and that's what happens. For all the people that are really into talking about Ronald Reagan and how he cut taxes and everything, well, Ronald Reagan did some of the biggest tax increases in the history of the United States. And how did he do that? It's called bracket creep. When the inflation was high, you know, running 6-7%, and people were getting pay raises based on a CPI of 5-6-7%, guess what? If you're and that time it wasn't indexed to, the tax brackets weren't indexed to inflation. So if inflation goes up, say you're making $100,000 and inflation is 6%, you get $6,000 more and you think you're matching up with inflation. Well, yeah, inflation goes up 6%, you get $6,000 more, but you're in a higher tax bracket. And so that's how he was able to recoup a lot of revenue. And that's one of the things of doing with the change CPI. keep the inflation rate low. Inflation goes higher. People get higher raises. And so when the raises are going up here while this one's going. And so every year, the federal government and the state governments will be able to collect more income tax revenue from people because the deductions and all the other stuff will not be going up in a realistic rate. So my recommendation is go out and Google and try to find out as much about change CPI as possible. You should be asking all your elected officials, what about change CPI? Because they're important, they're critical, and they could have a long-term effect on how your quality of living and your quality of life and standard of living goes once you start collecting that first Social Security check. It's going to have a big effect. And so, you know, like I said, if you're a troop, you can lose $125,000 over 40 years. That's a big chunk. So another Wednesday, by the time you do this, you might be home snowbound with another 14 to 18 inches, another spring storm, kind of like last year again. But then again, it's supposed to be warming up over the weekend and get ready for another storm, possibly for the following week. Well, if anything, the snow, if it's high enough, it'll be able to protect our plants from freezing like it did last year. And so, well, get the shovels out, get the heavy blanket, heat up the hot chocolate, and get ready for some more snow and maybe another off day from the kids from school, and have fun and enjoy the long road out there. And thank you.